Hello and welcome to the Motor Racing Passion Podcast, brought to you by Breakthrough Health and Wellness. We'd like to firstly welcome Breakthrough Health and Wellness for coming on board to support us. Breakthrough is a 60-day challenge containing a nutrition and exercise guide that achieves great results and doesn't get in the way of your life. Visit Breakthrough on Facebook and Instagram for more information. I'm Luke Blattman, as usual joined by Adam Blattman, Daniel Blattman and Brock Schaefer. And today we'll be reminiscing about the recently closed Parramatta City Raceway, or the Speedway by the Freeway as it was commonly known, which was and still technically is, located beside the M4 motorway at Parramatta, about 30 minutes west of the Sydney CBD. Now I'm looking out my window right now and I'm lucky enough that I can actually see the track. And a lot of the infrastructure is still there. They've taken a few of the corporate boxes away, but the grandstand still looks to be there, and I can still see the hill outside turn 2 and onto the back straight, and I can see turn 3. It's all pretty bare though. The plain white transporter that was parked there for most of 2020 is now gone, and sadly soon so will the whole precinct, replaced by the Metro train maintenance yard. Adam, what are some of your initial thoughts right now about the closure of the track?
Well, it was a bit of a shock when it got announced. Looking at where it was situated in, Parramatta, Granville, next to Rosehill Racecourse, pretty much there, that little industrial area. Wouldn't have thought that, that it would be that sudden for where it was. It was, just out of the blue, came through with the announcement, and then I guess the biggest thing was there was no announcement of a replacement of it initially. It was shutting down for it. The government were taking it back for the Metro train project for it there, and then I guess there was the big uproar from fans and in the industry about Parramatta and the history it had there for it, and then suddenly the replacement or the new Speedway was announced shortly after that from there. So yeah, no, in my mind it was just a big shock that when the announcement came out for it. How about yourself, Daniel and Brock? How did you take it?
Yeah, I was pretty surprised when it dropped, like just the abruptness of it. I think to your point there before, and the lack of plan. Like I think that it did seem like a bit of an afterthought in the uproar that was kind of caused by it. It's obviously set off some shockwaves, and thankfully it's resulted in a new facility which should keep the history and the sport here in Sydney, which is a positive. But yeah, I think from the initial shock, going through the stages of mourning, but now I'm actually looking forward to having potentially some better parking and commuting options to and from the new facility.
Yes, I was also upset, but then when they said they're going to build a bigger, better facility at Sydney Motorsport Park, I felt better about losing Parramatta.
I was sad when I read about it, but I felt it had been on borrowed time for a long time. There'd been rumours for many years that, at some point the government would reclaim the land for something.
It was inevitable. Definitely inevitable. If you look at all the apartments and just industry around there, it just seemed out of place. Like whenever you'd go there, it was just the weirdest place for a speedway. It was definitely inevitable, but it came so suddenly.
But that's when you look around there though, it's all industrial side. Like that's why I always thought that. Well, I was still surprised because obviously not thinking it'd turn into a shunting yard or whatever, a maintenance facility for a metro that's going to shave 3 minutes off a train trip to the city. I was still surprised that was the downfall of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at it right now, and yeah, you're right. It is all industrial around there. Sort of the closest greenery to it is Rosehill Racecourse.
Well, I guess from that is Rosehill Racecourse going to be shaking in its boots if the population in Western Sydney keeps growing and apartment buildings and the reliance on public transport. Have they got something to worry about, or is the gambling tax going to take care of that and keep it there?
No, if the government wasn't willing to get rid of the get rid of the greyhounds, even after they announced they were going to.
Yeah.
They're not going to get rid of Rose Hill. Too much of a money spinner, and that they're and I'll, the racing industry creates more votes than the speedway industry, unfortunately for us.
Well, I guess that's probably a point to when the announcement came through they were going to close it. I think a figure was thrown around. It was about $8 to $9 million that the speedway industry in and around Parramatta generated for the local economy around there, and people in Western Sydney, either from American Race Tyres, Hoosiers, and then all the other speedway shops in and around Sydney and stuff. It generated a lot there, and there was just no thought given to that. And I think that was one of the biggest uproars in it, as mentioned earlier, that there was no plan after it.
Also, it's worth considering the revenue they got from parking fines.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't park, and I myself paid at least 3 parking fines, so it did contribute in that way as well.
Well, you see, that's why you got to live close enough to get an Uber.
That was one reason that I'm sort of not so disappointed about it going to a new venue. The parking for that was atrocious. It was awful.
I haven't had to worry about parking for a few years when I went to the Speedway. Could just look out the window. Oh yeah, they're track packing. Okay, phone the Uber.
Better go.
Get over there.
But I guess that's one of the it's the Speedway by the M4 or whatever the catchphrase was for it.
Speedway by the Freeway.
Speedway by the Freeway. There we go.
Mike Raymond told you that on every ad.
But that it was the thing. Like, you knew it was there as iconic in this age. In this past few decades that's been there. It's that iconic thing of the Speedway on the Freeway for there. I'm sure in previous, with the Sydney Showgrounds, Liverpool Speedway, for there they would have had their own iconic things back in the day for it. But in our time, it's that, Speedway by the Freeway. It's kind of, everyone knew when you said Parramatta, oh, that's what it is.
It's in full view from the M4 as well. There was never any big barriers put up or anything. If you were driving along the M4, you look left, there's the track. I'm surprised. It's a wonder the fireworks when they went off didn't create more accidents.
Yeah, that's a good point. But even then, like, looking, you see the couple of snippets of photos that people have been putting up through that. They've just let the track surface grow through, and there's grass all going through it. Unmaintained on the outside. For it, as you said, some of the demountables are gone. They're just letting it, I guess, rot away from the inside for it until they actually break ground and start work on the metro works there. But I don't see that getting turned over for another year or two.
Ironically, the big Valvoline, because now obviously in the last few years it's been called Valvoline Raceway. The Valvoline signs that are sort of in between the spectator area and the M4. I mean, they're still illuminated and they're still up, and they actually changed them during COVID. They sort of put the latest sort of Valvoline branding up.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, there was presumably they paid for some sponsorship deal, but that was probably still ongoing. But yeah, it was just funny. There was nothing happening inside the track, but then all of a sudden you saw the Valvoline signs change.
I was always impressed by when you sit on the hill and you can watch all the cars slow down as they drove past. As they just slowed down, especially when the fireworks were going. Honestly, you'd see cars on the M4. So for people who aren't from Sydney, like a major motorway, cars doing 110 kilometres an hour just pulling over into the breakdown lane to watch the fireworks. So that's always something to get your attention.
Well, even when the track was slick and the dust would be kicking off when they come through turn 1, turn 2, and you'll see the big pool of dust just go straight over the motorway as well.
Do you remember sort of your first memories of the track? And well, I'll go to you first, Brock, for this one, because me, Adam, and Daniel will have the same answer. But do you remember the first time you went there?
I don't remember the first time, but I used to go a lot when I was like super duper young. Dad used to take me, I don't know, probably when I was like 5 or something. So I remember I used to like the Demolition Derby a lot. I don't think at that age I couldn't distinguish between the race and the Demolition Derby. Um, yeah, they're my memories. I just spent so much time there as a kid, and then more recently going all the time with my partner. And yeah, it's just a great way to spend a night.
The demo derbies are still great now, even for us at our age.
Well, when I first took my partner, it was her first Demolition Derby, and she wasn't all that taken back by it. And she sort of said, looks like you're just driving a normal day in Sydney. Like Sydney's driving standards probably detract from the shock factor of a Demolition Derby, but it's still a cool thing, and it's the only place you can see that sort of stuff. It's the Speedway.
Do you were you over there a night when they used to get the old Donut King jet van out, and they'd burn to the ground some of the losers in the demo derby? That's probably the only difference from a day in Sydney traffic.
The real question about Demolition Derby is, where do they keep finding Mitsubishi Magnas from?
Yeah.
I assume Gary Rush's Pick and Payless.
Because that was the thing. Yeah, they always had the few there. It was like the cheapest and longest nosed cars they could find. I guess for crush zones or whatever. But yeah, it was like Magnas. You always had your Commodores and Falcons there. But I think at one point, there was a couple of Hyundai XLs back in the day as well.
Cool, could have been. I mean, Magnas were the favourites.
XLs are worth big money now because of the XL series.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's probably people wanting to get into the XL series that'd look at old footage of that and just cry. It's like if when people were trying to find parts for HQ Kingswood Racing.
Yeah.
Well, so me, Daniel, and Adam, our first time was the 1992 Australian Sprint Car Championship.
It still haunts me.
Yeah. Why is that, Daniel?
Well, the guy who absolutely dominated, got robbed, absolutely robbed. So that's my boy Max Dumsney.
We were a bit of a Max Dumsney family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was a superstar. He still is a superstar. And
he was the reigning champion at that one too.
Absolutely dominated the race. Absolutely cruising, just bringing it home, and then bit of a freak. I can't remember if I've ever seen that happen again too. But obviously the struts on the big wing on the roof started to weaken or collapse. Yeah, and it shut down, and he kept going, which God knows how. Yeah, that's picked up the silver, and the person who we shall not name just kind of did the Stephen Bradbury and fell over the line to take the title. So as a 5-year-old or 6-year-old, whatever I was, I went home in tears that night.
Given it was Gary Rush that that passed him and won his, I think 92 was his 10th Australian title. I don't think we can say he Bradbury'd it.
Yeah, no, it was a Bradbury. And forever from that night, I'd cheer against anyone apart from Gary Rush.
Gary Rush was a Sydney legend.
I know, but that's the logic of a 5 or 6-year-old at the time when his favourite driver got cruelly cheated.
Well, I thought the worst moment of that night for you was when we must have been coming back we must have gone to get dinner or something, and we're walking back with Dad, and we've obviously walked past some Gary Rush fans, and they've said, "Oh, Max Dum Dum." I remember you probably a few tears at those words too, Daniel.
Yeah, just a lack of respect. Personally.
But I guess that's one of the good things. Like going back in '92, Max Dumsey was doing really well then, but he was still he raced last season or the last full season. He came out and did a race then, I think, didn't he?
Oh, he's still going full time.
Yeah.
As far as I know, he hasn't announced his retirement, so I assume he'll be doing the first season at the new Speedway at Eastern Creek. I don't think he's really indicated he's going to stop. But yeah, is that sort of your two first memories of Parramatta Speedway when we went that night?
Yeah, I can't remember anything earlier. I've still got the VHS, which I'm waiting to convert onto hard drive to add that to the collection. But yeah, so
I was
that's
watching
my
that
early
the Savo
friendship.
actually.
Oh, yeah, it's bittersweet. You almost just want to turn off.
If there wasn't lockdown, I would have invited you over to watch with me.
Yeah.
I remember we must have had some interest in Speedway for Mum and Dad to take us that night for the 92 Australian Championship. I remember sprint cars on because obviously Mike Raymond was a big proponent of Speedway. There were always highlights of Speedway on Australian Touring Car Championship broadcasts on Channel 7 and things like that. So that's probably how I became sort of aware of it. Yeah, and then that's probably how we ended up going. I'd probably seen highlights and then pestered Mum and Dad to take us all. But and it sort of became the family tradition, particularly on Boxing Days. On Boxing Day to go there.
Yep.
Well, I think that was the the real strength of that setup was public holidays and summer period while people are off, and obviously the daylight savings. It was getting there early after or late afternoon, and watching the sunset into the race. So I think that kind of Boxing Day, New Year's, that time frame there was it was in its element.
What do you think sort of attracted us to Speedway racing? Considering we're all four of us who into everything, but sort of primarily any involvement we've had has been circuit racing. Why do you think we love the Speedway so much?
I think because it's so different to circuit racing, that it's on the dirt, it's very visual. The car's got a lot of attitude on the racing surface. It's throwing up mud, dust, everything. They're racing close together, along with the variety of different classes that they run there. You've got the big obviously the 410 sprint cars. Now you've got midgets, wingless sprints, late models, street stockers, V8 modifieds, the AMCA V8s. There's just that much variety, and it's action packed. Like, it doesn't stop all night. Like, as soon as one heat race is finished, the next one's rolling out before the last car's left the track. So it just doesn't stop. So I think it's all of those things combined that just make a fantastic event.
Yeah, I was going to say they do put on a good show like that in terms of there's no dead time apart from with some unseasonable
apart from
rain.
when they water the track.
Yeah.
Or they do track work. They get the grader out. That's the only time when if you've brought someone new to the Speedway, that's probably the only time they might you might have to do a bit of fill with them and try and explain what's happening.
But even from that, like they had the old VW Beetles out there, so once they've watered it, ripped the track, and they're doing a bit of track packing with them. That used to be a bit of a show in itself.
No, but I especially from one of my mates who's not a racing fan at all, and he came along one night, and I wouldn't say he was overwhelmed with excitement from on track, but when he saw that the beers were $4 a can, he was it was his favourite place on earth. So.
What about you, bro?
I think as well, it's really reasonably priced. Like the GA tickets are like really affordable compared to some other sporting events in Sydney. So I think that's another benefit.
You get a lot for your money, and that's the thing.
Yeah,
to your point, it's reasonable because you see a lot.
Yeah, it's not too crowded. Like, parking's an issue, but the stands, there's always room in the stands or on the hill for you. The beers are cheap. It's just super relaxed. There's no sort of security running around trying to ruin your night. The race is just one after the other, no downtime, like you guys said. And it's just old school. It's almost like if you could say, what would you want a race meeting to be? I mean, that's pretty much what you'd make it. The fireworks for the kids, the commentators always getting the crowd involved in between heats. It's just so fun. Like, it's probably, like, minute for minute, probably the most entertaining motorsport events I've ever been to have all been Speedway.
And I think the good thing about it is, like, on it saying it's like good hard racing. There isn't too much interference from race control like you see in other circuit racing forms. Like if an incident happens on the track, the person who causes the stoppage for it goes to the back, or if the cause or the person turns someone around, they get sent to the back. It's kind of dealt with then and there. There's not too much of this post race penalties or anything like that. It's kind of just dealt with at the roll arounds after the stoppage, and then you go back racing. I think that's really cool about it.
I think as well, one thing that I really like about it is and like you shouldn't because you get smashed with clay, but if you sit right up the front of the grandstands, when the race is on, like those cars are seriously fast and you're so close to them. And just the assault on your senses with the dust, the sound, there is no break. You do not get 1 second where you don't have a car blasting past you. You can't hear the commentary. You can't talk to the person next to you. And you are just so like caught up in this race that's going on. And it's no other motorsport gives you that. Like you get it if you stand on the pit wall of a track. But for a spectator, it's just constant. Like it's just such an assault on all your senses. And for me, it's like a massive highlight. Like it's almost too much. It's almost too much to comprehend. Like there's just so much going on. Yeah. You don't know where to look. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, because I think that's too, when you watch the heats and that's pretty good, and then you go to the pole shuffle and that's like it's pretty good, too dicing. But then when you go to the C and the B and the A mains, and then sometimes there's 30 of them all on the line, absolutely letting loose as the flag drops. That's you
don't know where to look. You look at one part of the track and you're missing something that everyone else is going off at next year and going, how good's that? And you look up and you missed it, and then you're trying to find out where the leaders are or the next battle pack or the car that you're trying to follow. It's just, it's just, as Brock said, an assault on your senses. Like it's great.
I've had that happen. You can be following a car around the other end of the track, just you're following it around, and then sort of all of a sudden the car's on the other side of the track and that you're following, and all of a sudden the yellow lights come on and you look down and right in front of you a car's rolled over or something.
Yeah.
I have had that happen more than once.
But even that, like you look at it, like Sydney Speedway, Parramatta, Valve, it's just under half a kilometre long, so it's at 460 metres, something for that. And the 410 sprint cars, I think the lap record there's I think 11.5 seconds. So like they're moving something chronic. Like I think they'll be doing at least 160 down the straights, and then probably not too much below that going through the corners with all the downforce and everything they got. So it's just it's amazing how much they stick to the racing surface.
And the smell of sprint cars is unmistakable.
Methanol's just got that beautiful smell, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's something about it like mixed with clay though. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
Like it's not romantic. Probably not a first date location, but
I don't know.
You don't think the outside of turn 2 on the hill is a romantic spot?
I don't think so, but maybe for a second date.
But that's one of the good things, like with it being on a like most Saturday nights or public holidays at that dinner time start time, you get a lot of families and a lot of people go, I see the Speedway on, they go and they rock in and they've got like white shirts, or they completely don't know what they're fully going into, and you see them halfway through the night and they're just covered head to toe in dirt and dust and everything, and they're loving it, but they're like, oh geez, I'm a bit underprepared for this.
My partner learned early not to wear white to the Speedway. The accessibility as well is something that's really good. Like if at the end of the night after the final, after the A main, you go walk around the pits and everything's open. You can walk right next to the cars. You can talk to the drivers. You can everyone's welcoming and everything's open.
And I think that's the best thing. Like everyone's welcoming, as you said. You can go up, you can buy shirts directly from the drivers. There isn't these big fancy merchandise trailers that's pretty much out the back of their car for some of them, selling shirts, posters, hats, whatever they got, and even they're reasonably priced for them. But yeah, like you go there and you can talk up to them, you can touch the cars for them. You know, they're halfway through cleaning them down and start breaking them down for their race the next night at some points for it. So it's just, yeah, it's completely different to circuit racing, especially when you get up to those major classes where a lot of people are behind closed doors and you can't actually physically see them all that often.
Yeah, it was always a good show.
One other thing that is super cool that I forgot to mention is where else in Australia do you get NASCAR drivers?
True.
And like that's cool because I'm a bit of a NASCAR fan, and like just yeah, like you know, it's just cool. Like it's just man, there's so many layers to Speedway. Now we're talking about it because of COVID and Speedway shutting down been so long. Now I'm getting like all excited remembering how cool it was.
Yeah.
Man,
Well, that's
Well,
what
even-
made those summer periods, like particularly in the last few years when they were getting Casey Kane, Kyle Larson,
yeah,
a couple of years earlier Tony Stewart.
yeah. Like I remember when Kyle Larson was racing, I'm saying to my partner, I'm going, that's a NASCAR driver. And they're like, that's cool as. Like, you
And,
remember-
and Kyle Larson put on a show when he was out here.
Oh yeah.
There was,
Casey
there was
Young
Kane,
Money.
yeah.
What they call him Young Money.
yeah, he
Young,
was.
yeah.
There was one night. He only did about 4 or 5 events, I think.
Came and just did Speedway, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he did Boxing Day, and I think he would have done New Year's night, and he might have done 1 or 2 after that. But he'd left by the Darley anyway, and there was one night there when he was running mid pack. He was all or nothing, and he just had his foot down, and 2 laps out of 3, he'd slide off the track at turn 1. He'd just lose the groove and slide off, and then, you know, but the next lap he'd just come right on it, right around the outside and pick off 2 or 3 people. And then the next lap he'd come off, and then he'd lose all the time he'd made up, and then he'd get back. It was great to watch. It wasn't quick, but it was great to watch.
But yeah,
I think even the quality of like, so obviously the NASCAR guys, which always bring something new each year, but then even like Donny Schatz and some of the World of Outlaws guys,
Oh yeah,
getting involved too. So the quality was there. There was always something to see.
the Kinses were regulars.
Yeah.
And even the Madsons coming back.
Yeah,
Like they're always willing to come out and for it, Brad Sweet,
in recent years. Yeah.
Carson Macedo.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a Macedo fan. He was my man the last few times.
But even that, like, yeah, you had those big names, but even just the local, the what do they phrase themselves at the Sydney Speedway? It was the
Parramatta Posse.
Parramatta Posse. I was going to say the Sydney Speedway Mafia, but the Parramatta Posse, like Sam Walsh, James Thompson, the Dumsneys and everything there that would come in and they'll just battle these big stars and run them like they'll just another racer, and it just provided so many different cool races between everyone.
What's the best looking sprint car, you reckon? Because I'm gonna go with the Cool Drive sprint car. I really like that one.
Oh, that's a good one. I didn't mind Brad Sweet's 99 from the blue, yellow, black one. Was that 215-16? I think it was. That looked pretty good, but probably one down the back that probably trumps that to a point is the Lansvale Smash Repairs fluoro yellow sprint car always stood out on the track for me.
What about you, Daniel?
So probably a tie from mine. Obviously, the classic Valvoline Dumsney livery. That's the one that's just a constant and iconic, and also it mirrors the 1994 Robbie Gordon Walker Racing livery as well, which is a strong point. And then combined with James Thompson's sleek, simple design of the last few years as well. So I put them on the same cards, on the same line.
I can't go past Robbie Farr's Peter Jackson car from the 90s.
See, I thought you would have gone the Winfield car.
Oh, the Winfield cars look good. And actually, ironically, so too did the Quit cars that Ron Cricky used to race and Jeff Leask.
Yeah. I forgot Jeff Leask ran sprint cars for a period.
Yeah, he did. He was very good as well.
Yeah.
I think Stephen Gall as well. He did a bit of sprint car racing.
See, I think that's like the good thing about it, especially in the time frame of running over the summer. A lot of the other form of motorsport, they're finished, so a lot of other drivers can come across and dabble in Speedway, like we've seen Cameron Waters dabble into Speedway in the last few years in various categories and jumping up to 410s over last summer for it. But yeah, you look at all the other stars from circuit racing giving it a go, or even motorbikes and stuff. So that's pretty cool to see.
Well, if in terms of Parramatta City Raceway, Wayne Gardner raced there, Neil Crompton, Paul Morris. I mean, he raced more than just Parramatta. But those are some guys who had a bit of a go.
Because that would have been back World of Outlaws when Paul Morris was running around.
He's finished up full-time V8 supercar racing at the end of 2008. So I think that was when he got into the sprint cars a bit more often.
Yeah,
he might have done it a bit before then, but I think he was a bit more regular, probably from 2009 onwards. And the Outlaws only ran 04 to 08.
I think someone needs to make a Martin sprint car.
Well, I'd be right behind that. That'd be really good. Actually, speaking of that, I've changed my mind on the best looking one because it's just come into my head. The Kinzer family had a quartet of JPS sponsored sprint cars in the I think 1984 that sort of ran they did a bit of a tour of Australia, and so they looked really good.
That would have looked good under lights, gloss black with the gold JPS.
Yeah,
that would have looked good. Like if they did that today, that would look really cool under lights.
Yeah, but no, I guess we just need sprint car racing to become big in Europe for Martini to get interested. Either that, or someone just needs to paint it up in that colour scheme.
Yeah, you could just have like Marniti.
So we'll go through a bit of the history now of Parramatta City Raceway and just jump in with any comments as I go through a bit of the history of the place. The site where the track's located, it was known as the Granville Showgrounds, which is a little bit ironic when you think about it, that the Parramatta City Raceway was based at Granville Showgrounds, and earlier in the 60s we had Westmead Speedway, which is now the site of Westmead Hospital. But when it was Westmead Speedway, that was in the grounds of Parramatta Showgrounds. So technically you had Westmead Speedway at Parramatta Showground, then you had Parramatta Speedway at Granville Showgrounds. But that was so originally the Granville Showgrounds, they had a speedway that was used for motorcycles, sidecars and midgets from 1932 to 1936. So there was a bit of history in the track before sort of the modern era started. So Sid Hopping, who was a former competitor in sidecars and also the early modified sprint cars, he got together with a business associate, Bert Wilder, and they got Parramatta City Raceway up and running in January 1977. So they in the Granville Showgrounds. So they built the track up, and it was ready by January 1977 to for competitors to start practicing. They built the track inside the trotting track. So obviously you had the trotting track around the outside, and the speedway would then run around the inside.
So the current shape of the track, as it is now, obviously it changed from back in 77 when it first started. It was inside a trotting track, because your trotting tracks are generally longer ovals.
No, it's still the same.
Still the same. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the reason you've got the runoff area nowadays.
Yeah.
Because I mean the trotters obviously stopped. I would say mid to late 90s. They were still there in 92 when we were there. But yeah, so that's sort of what was the trotting track is basically the runoff area. So it was noted in the press at the time in January 1977 that Sydney had lost many speedways over the years, and how great it was that a lost venue had come back to the sport, which is a bit ironic when dealing with what we are now.
Lasted 43 years though. At least that's a decent innings.
Yeah. Parramatta planned to hold their events on Friday nights so as not to clash with Sydney Showgrounds Speedway and Liverpool Speedway, who regularly ran on the Saturday nights. And it was noted that the railing for the trotting track had to be dismantled on the Friday before racing and had to be reinstalled after the Friday night racing in time for the early Saturday morning trotting practice. The track had a speedway focus right from the start. This is a quote from Bert Wilder on the track's opening. He said, bike fans have been catered for this season at the showground, while midget fans and the supporters of pavement sedans have been similarly well catered for at Liverpool. But followers of the sprint cars and sedans on dirt have been starved of action. Our raceway will certainly give them that action. So there was obviously a feeling that sprint cars at the time were getting a bit neglected. Right, so the first race meeting was held on Friday night, the February 4th, 1977, with the main attraction being a visiting American, Jimmy Sills. The first sprint car race was won by Kel Young, and the feature race, which was the City of Parramatta Sprint Car Classic, was won by Bob Blacklaw. It's a bit of info on Jimmy Sills. He was 23 at the time when he ran the first event at Parramatta, and he was very early in what would go on to be a very long career. He actually won the 1978 Grand Annual Sprint Car Classic at Warrnambool, and will go on to win 3 USAC Silver Crown titles and have 8 World of Outlaw wins. The track was then officially opened on Friday, February 18th, 1977 by former Parramatta Mayor and one of Parramatta's, quote, most famous citizens, Barry Wilde. So I looked up a bit of info on Barry Wilde, and he was an Australian politician. He served on Parramatta City Council from 1959 to 1977, and as Deputy Mayor in 1966, and as the Mayor from 1967 to 1974. He then served on as a Labor Party member of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly from 1976 until 1988, representing the electorate of Parramatta. And in 2016, he was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia for service to the Parliament of New South Wales and to the community of Parramatta. So we did get a most famous citizen to officially open the track.
There you go. I was about to ask. I wonder who is the most famous outside of this. Obviously, the most famous person to visit the Speedway, apart from Smoke, to be honest.
I guess how you look at it, like, do you determine it from racing circles or?
Yeah, no, more. I was thinking was like prime ministers, that we had anyone from the royal family.
I think the Queen would be a big fan of Speedway,
Yeah,
wouldn't she?
I'm pretty sure I've seen her out there a few times.
Having a Dagwood dog and a beer and up in the stands, and
Yeah.
Sam Mack did Sunrise from there a couple of times.
yeah, let's.
That's about as close as we get.
Would you really call that royalty though?
No, but I don't know.
I'm sure Koshy
Famous, I guess.
Sunrise.
Sunrise. So Sid and Bert, they sold PCR to a man named Bob Rutley in 1987, who then sold the track. Well, I should clarify, by selling the track, I think just they sell the running of the track, because as far as I could gather, it was still Crown land throughout the whole lifetime of the track, because it was still rental showground. Yeah, and I suppose, purchasing they'd sell the running of the track, I guess. So Bob Rutley purchased the running of the track in 1987, and then he sold the running of the track to Gary Rush in 1989. And then he took on David Lander initially as a partner, and then Lander then took the track over himself in 1989. And really, the 90s were sort of the glory period, the golden age for the track. There was it was very popular. They had a lot of backing from Peter Jackson, and that was probably when sprint car racing was at its most popular.
Well, it was always getting run on Channel 7. Obviously, that's probably the Mike Raymond influence when 7 were covering touring cars for it. But because and radio, you always remember the catchphrase blasting out on the radio and everything about that coming through 2WS and everything back in the day.
Be there.
Be there, yeah.
It also got a lot of good coverage on Speedweek on SBS. So then in 2001, David Lander, he got out, and the track was passed on to Brian Healy and Bob Spence, who then under their leadership, that's when Outlaws Down Under came along in 2004 and would continue through to 2008. And that was, I guess that was probably the glory period of the noughties for the track, to have the World of Outlaws coming down for a proper round of their championship.
Because that continued on for quite a number of years, didn't it?
Yeah, 5 years, 2004 to 2008.
Yeah, and then there was a bit of a falling out.
No. So Brian Healy, I don't know of a falling out. Anyway, so Brian Healy passed away in 2008, and then in 2009 the track was taken over by a consortium that included Gary Rush, Rod Bowen, Dennis Loudon, Brett Morris, and Peter Attard. So gathering from that, I took it to, I guess, just without Brian Healy, the deal couldn't be done with the new owners.
Yeah, and they just went their own separate ways.
Yeah, I mean, the Americans still kept coming out, just I guess not for an Outlaws round. But yeah, as ever, I mean, just sort of post 2008, the Americans still came out en masse every international season. So from there, then in the Gary Rush, Rod Bowen, Dennis Loudon, Brett Morris, Peter Attard era, the track changed its name first of all to Sydney Speedway, which I guess was, I guess I can understand that from a branding sort of idea. And then also past, it then became Valvoline Raceway, and I think about 2013 when they took over naming rights. And then in 2014, the track was taken over by Barry Waldron, and the Waldrons would then run the track until the end, pretty much. And during their sort of tenure running the track, there was a lot of investment put into it. Namely, they paved the pits. There was we got the big screen in the middle of the track. We got a bar at turn 1, and just a lot of investment in general.
Were they the ones that kickstarted Clay Per View, or?
Yes,
yeah.
Under their sort of under their tenure, we got the Clay Per View kicked off. And
have we ever seen any figures on the Clay Per View? Like, obviously, times I've watched it, it's excellent, and then I think it's where all sports headed. But I'm interested, have they ever shared any of the viewership figures or the take up? Because Speedway went pretty early with that, like ahead of many other sports in this country.
No, none that I've seen, but it must have been popular enough.
Well, I'm like, for it to keep going, it's obviously there's a decent take up, but I'd just be fascinated to see, because they always get good crowds. I always interested to know what it would be like on the from a Clay Per View point of view.
Because usually on the big night you'll get 10 to 15.
Well, that's another thing too. They're rarely do they announce crowds, mainly just because I don't think they feel the need to. It's obvious, it's well supported. But compared to let's say other sports or motorsport disciplines who ram their crowd figures or made up crowd figures down their throat, it's interesting. Speedway obviously doesn't feel the need to.
I think the Waldrons took over in 2014. I think under the previous consortium, I mean, it was still popular. I think a night at the Speedway was still popular, but I think it was sort of in its niche. Whereas when the Waldrons took over, there was sort of a real push to make it a bit more mainstream, and I think that's where the obviously they spruced up the venue a bit, but then there was obviously Clay-Per-View came along and they launched the USC.
That was a big like bold move for themselves to launch their own track championship. To like obviously it was their version of the West Coast Outlaws and everything like that. Kind of giving their own big name, but that picked up really quickly.
Yeah, well, before then it had just been it was just called in 2013 or even 2014, the first year of them running, it was just called the Parramatta Track Championship.
Yeah.
And then for 2015, 16, that's when they launched the USC sort of banner, and then obviously with their track in Queensland, the Waldrons, they were able to have a bit of a they could sort of run a championship between the two tracks while still having each track's individual season.
Well, and that's probably a good point. Like from 2014 when they took over Parramatta Speedway, then they branched out up to Toowoomba, High-Tech Speedway up in Toowoomba.
I think they had that already.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then they branched out to South Australia, and they also got they're running a track in South Australia as well.
Yeah. I think they're still running both those tracks too. Oh, yeah. They're definitely still running High-Tech. I think they're still running the track in South Australia too.
Because I think that's where, on various Facebook pages and stuff, when they were taking some of the equipment out, they're all heading up north. So I assume a lot of the equipment was going to their other tracks underneath their management.
Some other interesting little bits in the history of the track. In the early 90s, it was proposed to put a NASCAR oval around the outside of the sprint car track.
That would have been cool.
Yep.
Because how do you think that would have changed, on a side note, the outcome of NASCAR in Australia? Do you reckon that would have propelled that more forward?
Yeah, it could have helped, because what hurt NASCAR was a lack of tracks, basically.
Yeah.
They do 5 rounds a year at the Thunderdome, and then they do one event at the Bull Ring at Adelaide International Raceway, and then one year they had they did a road course race at Eastern Creek. Yeah, they went to Oran Park. They have a race on the Gold Coast, but I mean, obviously it was very centralised to the Calder Park Thunderdome, which I loved it, so it was fine by me. But I would have loved to. Look, maybe in the long run, it may not have made any difference at all. So it was probably. I mean, I can only assume the push to basically they were going to pave the trotting track.
Yeah, right. Yep.
That was basically the idea, and probably I remember a story on it on one of the touring car telecasts actually. So Mike Raymond was obviously pushing it a little bit as well, because Mike Raymond had also come from Liverpool, who'd paved their track. But I mean, it would have been really good to see.
Well, you would have had that even more chance of more crossover from the, NASCAR guys jumping into Speedway potentially, and you could almost have double headers to a point, depending on how dirty the NASCAR track would be, that you could run sprint cars and other Speedway classes, and then run your NASCARs as well under lights. Like that would have been interesting to see if they could pull it off.
They had a plan at the time to sort of basically inject a lot of money into the whole Granville Showground precinct, because they wanted to put a touch football ground in the middle, and basically use the whole area for more community events. They wanted to have a Paddy's Market style market on Thursdays and Sundays. But the one thing was, it was going to put out the trotters. Basically, they wouldn't be able to practice there. And there's a quote from the Agricultural and Industrial Society president, Hal Warren, at the time, saying that it was definitely an approved project, saying, we believe there'll be some squeals from the trotting fraternity who use the showground for training, but everything else has been ironed out and the trotters have no choice. Well, in the end, the trotters did go, but also the NASCAR track never happened. And they've quietly dropped, I guess. But there were big plans for it. Mike Raymond was quoted as saying that it was expected there'd be more than 20,000 people would head to Parramatta every week for Speedway and NASCAR events, and that they wanted to host 5 international NASCAR meetings a year, which I think was a little bit bold. Yeah, very bold. But shame it didn't happen, because it would have been right on our doorstep. A few other quotes from it. This is from Alan Edworthy in 1992. He was saying that as the nation's first purpose-built sprint car track, PCR has long been recognised as the birthplace of authentic sprint car racing in Australia, and as the home of the national champion for 12 of its 14 years in existence. Its reputation as the toughest track in the country speaks for itself, which shows how well thought of the track is, or was.
I would like to know, I mean, obviously none of us have ever done any speedway driving, but I would like to know, like, from someone who has raced there, like, was it actually a good speedway, like, to race on?
I think it was. I think they loved the fact that basically that you had a bit of space on the outside, so you could have a bit of a go, and you had a bit of leeway.
Didn't Stevie race there, Adam?
Yeah, he ran a couple. He had a couple of events there in the wingless, and Lawrence had a race in the wingless there too, and stuff. And I think it was the track surface. They put a lot of work into the track surface over the years, and got it to a point where it raced really well. Because I remember hearing lots of things and seeing that the track was either really, really slick, or they overwatered it and got real boggy and muddy and very much one lined for it there. But in the last couple of years they got it to a point where the bottom line and the top line on the cushion would develop, and you'll get a lot of good racing there.
I think a good sign of how popular the track was Corey Eliason in early 2020. He was doing World Series sprint cars, and they skipped out of a World Series sprint car round to come and do a race at Parramatta, and he ended up winning it. And in the interview afterwards, he was saying that they'd heard the track was closing and they wanted to try and get here and have a win before it closed. Okay. So yeah, I guess that shows the and he's from America, so I guess it showed sort of the reputation it had overseas.
Well, I guess to the point of like the Claper view and everything on, I think they did a deal with Dirt Vision in the US, and they simulcast or did something with any of the Sydney Parramatta Speedway events that a lot of people from the US would watch sprint cars in Australia.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think Speedway fans in general, they'll watch, whether it's in Australia or in America, they'll watch it wherever it is. A couple of other quotes from Mike Raymond on the track. He said that when conditions are ideal, they produce fantastic racing and entertainment for the spectators, and when they're not, it tends to sort out the kings from the kids in quite a hurry. And he also went on to say that Parramatta Speedway lacked the intimate amphitheatre atmosphere of Liverpool Speedway.
Which is interesting because, and I'm sure we'll get to this later on, but I would have said the strength of the Parramatta Speedway was that hill section, below the bar and all the way around to the exit of turn 2. To me, that is an amphitheatre. Yeah,
especially when there's a lot of people there. It I guess it's a bit more open than Liverpool was, like open air, whereas things are a bit tighter, packed in. And I suppose, and then you've got, before that there was Sydney Showground. There was a lot of grandstand and covered grandstand there.
Yeah, but and this is the thing for the facility they're building now though, is that I'm like, in a lot of cases I don't want to go and sit in a grandstand. Like, you can sit on the grass and sit on the hill and do that. I think that's a strength. And one thing that Parramatta Speedway was probably future-proofing itself for was like anticipating COVID coming. So they probably wanted some more open space so spectators can social distance.
Yeah, well, they thought a long way ahead for that then.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I mean, well, I loved the fact they put that bar in at turn 1.
Yeah, well, I think that's good, and also it helps spread out the crowd, so it's not you're not going to bottleneck in different places. So yeah, I think that's an excellent addition.
That shifted our viewing. We used to always sit at outside of turn 2, but then we sort of slowly moved ourselves back into the turn 1 bar. When we got to the track, that was pretty much, are there any seats there?
It's a good spot because you could see the whole track. You had a good bit of elevation. And everything you needed was right in a 15-meter radius.
When it comes to the closure of the track and the announcement and everything, how do you think that was handled?
But you mean handled by the government?
Mainly the government, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think as we touched on earlier, not well, just because they clearly didn't have a plan in place, and they just, I think, were a bit taken back by the the ferocity of the criticism that kind of forced them into.
I doubt, and he can come on the podcast to refute this if he likes. I doubt Andrew Constance even knew there was a speedway there when he did the announcement about the metro.
Well, I wonder if they didn't fully Well, obviously they knew that they owned it because they could take it back. But yeah.
But I doubt he knew there was actually a speedway there, or that it'd create such a fuss that.
Yeah, well, I think that's what they underestimated. So yeah, the pushback from the whole industry.
Because to turn around a day or so later and say, "Oh, of course we were going to build a new speedway."
Yeah, and because you think that would have come out in the initial. If you're managing the situation well, you include that with the original announcement. Yeah.
I mean, if you were knocking down a football stadium, they'd have announced the new plans before they announced they were going to knock down the current one.
Well, look at Sydney Football Stadium. They're like, here's X amount of money, we're knocking it down and going to rebuild it to the current standard, and it's going to be done by this date for it. And it was all in the same conversation.
By comparison, though, Parramatta Pool.
I knew you were going to say that.
Knocked down 5 years ago, and not even a bit of dirt has been turned yet. So, I would say it's another example of governments dropping the ball.
I do have to say, though, I'm impressed that they did actually follow through with building the new speedway. Because they had the perfect get out clause in coronavirus, I think.
But in a way, it almost worked to their advantage because all the infrastructure money that was going in last year, infrastructure building was actually a bit of a priority. So, the coronavirus thing might have actually worked in its favour.
And it looks like that looks like they have put a lot of effort into it. A lot of people have made comments about the location, and which it is. I don't think it's the perfect location for it. It's just been shuffled into a corner of the Eastern Creek precinct.
Did you just call it Eastern Creek?
I did. No, we're going to come on to that. We're going to come on to that in a second.
You're going to have Andrew Constance on the phone tomorrow.
But I guess that's one of the things. Like, it was just said, "Oh, we're doing it here," and then there was the uproar from Western Sydney International Dragway. Are they still called Wizard?
It's called Sydney Dragway.
Sydney Dragway. Okay, I missed that one. For it, I still call it Wizard. For it there, but there was the bit of backlash from them saying, the speedway goes here, it's going to blow dust onto our onto the drag strip. Then we can't run drag meetings while that's happening, and they put in all these constraints on the speedway to say that they need dust monitoring or this and that. For it. So there was the bit of the pushback from that as well.
Can you guys just imagine like the end of next year when everything's like completed and, hopefully the drags and the speedway can get along with the dust, and then, you go watch a state championship round at the circuit during the day, and then you can go across, watch the drags, and then go watch the speedway to finish the night. Like, that could be pretty cool.
With the old triple challenge in a different way.
Yeah, like a proper triple challenge, and I think that's a big benefit potentially of the Speedway being at Sydney Motorsport Park.
And do you know what would be good as well? Like the whole, like if all the venues there work together. So like, do you know what I mean? I'm thinking like an annual football membership or something where you pay money and do you know what I mean? Throughout the year you can just flash your card and turn up to whatever, or if they're going to do a triple header or something like that, you can just buy one ticket and get you access. Do you know what I mean? Actually be smart about it and try and draw people in that way.
That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah, no, I mean, if there's a job going at the place too, I'm
actually a
open
really
to,
good idea.
If they want me to, promote it or handle that part of it, I'm more than happy to. So.
Do you think more effort should have been put in to have events at Parramatta last summer or earlier this year?
When you say more effort, by whom?
By the leaseholders, by the government.
Yeah, well, I think if you're waiting on the government to be proactive, it's probably wasted energy. But yeah, I was surprised, and don't get me wrong, I understand why the promoter or the leaseholder was reluctant to with the ongoing restrictions.
Yeah.
But I did feel like there were probably some opportunities to push it harder with government to get some exemptions. Not suggesting they're the NRL or the AFL, but you did see some other sports, get some exemptions and get some things. To it. The only, I guess, concern with that would have been whether they could actually get interstate teams to travel.
You probably wouldn't have been able to.
And that's. But I'm just trying to think around Christmas. Melbourne had opened up. Sydney had that little blip, but nothing. It wasn't over the top. So,
I can understand why the promoter, given the fact that the track, they couldn't use the track beyond this year. I think if the track was, if they'd been able to continue their lease through to 2026 or something, whenever they still had a lease for another couple of years, I think they probably would have been able to put events on earlier this year because they would have had the chance to make some money back that they'd lose running the events early this year with a limited crowd and things like that.
Yeah, no, and they do rely, like, gentlemen, you see that in terms of how it's done. Like, they do rely on a crowd to make it economically viable, and same for the teams and things. But
and with the track closing, they would have had no chance to make any money back, so you can't blame them at all.
But I was a little bit surprised there wasn't a call to arms or something to try and get like a one-off.
Do you think because the government closed the track, they should have fronted up some money for a farewell event?
Well,
I think the track was in too much of a state of disrepair. Like even the photos of it, at the end of last year, it was trashed. It had weeds growing out of the ground. I think it would have taken too much to get it up and running for 1 or 2 rounds this season. And
I know there'd be calls, if with me saying should the government have ponied up the money for a farewell event, there'll be calls of people say, well, just be great if the government's just built you a whole new speedway, which I understand. But they were the ones who've taken away this speedway as well. But then you look at it another way, Liverpool never got a farewell event. So it's not as if this hasn't happened before in Sydney.
I think it's like, I'm probably the only person, but I think it's pretty good. Like, I think it makes sense if they go into a different venue that, is in a motorsport hub. It's easier access for a lot of people, like with parking and whatnot. It's, I think it's going to be a new facility, better facilities. I think it's a good thing, but I know I'm in the minority.
I'm with you too, Brock. Like it obviously was disappointing to start with, but I'm like the outcome is not bad. Like, do you know what I mean? As you said, we're getting a brand new 2021 built standard facility. So I think once we're there, definitely not gonna complain. I guess just the way it occurred is probably the biggest criticism for it.
And I just think it's a shame it's been shoehorned into a corner of Eastern Creek. Like it's not as if it was. No, it's not as if it was planned to put something there.
It wasn't, but Speedway has such a big following, and he's such like a good spectacle. Like it will become like they won't be the side act. I think the Speedway will become like, very, very prominent, maybe even more so than the Dragway. I reckon they'll make it their own.
Could you put it anywhere else there?
No, not at Eastern Creek.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's not like there was other.
But, I mean,
If
it wasn't planned to go there, if they had no plans before the Metro came along, if the government had no plans to put it there, then, there wouldn't have been any room for it anyway.
That's what I mean, but I was like, there was nowhere else in New South Wales to put it, was there?
Well, the Waldrons wanted to put it at the corner of the M7 and the M4.
Yeah, because that's all government crown land, all the way to the M7, from where Eastern Creek City Motorsport Park is, pretty much there. So I think they're trying to push it there to keep the Speedway by the Freeway, or motorway, paid motorway for the M7.
Yeah, but whilst it keeps a catchy phrase in play, I think that's a long bow to draw.
Well, it was that far out of the way to get there. Like, you would pretty much have to get to Sydney Motorsport Park and then turn back on yourself to go back down to the M7 to get there. So there was a bigger infrastructure outlay for the government to build roads there for it.
Yeah.
The only real reason I can think of why they should have put it as Easter Creek, and it's going to sound funny, but genuinely, because it's right next to the tip. And seriously, like, it's just the worst thing to sit there for 5 hours when the wind's blowing the wrong direction.
But when we were there for the Shannon's Nationals, did you notice it? Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just
which way the wind's blowing.
Yeah.
If the wind blows the wrong way, mate, I'm telling you, you get out of the car and it knocks you out.
Oh, because I was just like, that whole day I didn't.
Put it this way, I drive past there every day going to work, and when you go along, that's when you close your vents as you get near there.
It's shocking.
Especially on a 40-degree summer day.
On a 5-degree winter's morning too, but I mean, look, there are days when there's nothing, you don't notice anything, but there are other days when you do. But
wasn't there a grand plan for the Eastern Creek complex to be like the center of motorsport, and they were going to put in a speedway somewhere else along with a motocross track and a few other things years ago? Wasn't that presented?
Well, they wanted to do that sort of stuff at Oran Park many moons ago. Put a speedway in and that.
I thought it was something in Auto Action like years and years ago that they were floating this big motorsport complex, and they're going to try and get all different forms of motorsport to go around there. Maybe it was just
they could have. They've been making plans for a new speedway to take over from Parramatta for a very long time, and there's a lot of proposals that have been made over. I guess it was inevitable that it would end up at Eastern Creek.
It's probably something you should have researched before the podcast, Adam.
Probably. It only just came to mind, so.
All right, well, Adam's going to go do some research, and we're going to have a quick break, and we'll be back soon. Breakthrough Health and Wellness. The Breakthrough 60-Day Challenge combines a highly effective weight loss program and a high-end personal fitness experience without costly memberships. In a culture of flash workouts and going hard, Breakthrough have taken a more sustainable approach and developed the perfect program that will not only get you fit and healthy, but also help you shed stubborn weight that you thought was never going to budge. Breakthrough will offer new inspiration and goals that will lead to life changes you can easily maintain. Each week, Breakthrough offer interesting muscular endurance, strengthening and functional movement exercises with a training app that will rival any workout you have done at the gym. For more information, visit mybreakthrough.com.au. That's my-breakthrough.com.au. BreakThru, and follow Breakthrough on Facebook and Instagram. Welcome back to the podcast. Brock, what's the best driver and the best memories you have of Parramatta City Raceway?
Oh, look, I'm just going to go with modern history because I'm not a sprint car nut like you guys. So I'm going to go Carson Macedo and just all of his races. I don't have a particular one. They're all exciting, and I can't remember them all off my head. So
just Carson Macedo in general.
Yeah, Carson Macedo. That's it.
Well, that's what it's all like. The American drivers coming over. That's what it was all about. You know, particularly over Christmas, New Year's. There were a couple of years there. I think it was at the 17, 18, and 18, 19 seasons where they didn't bring many Americans over, and I think that hurt a lot of the interest in it.
Yeah, the American guys bring the US showbiz with them.
Yeah,
for sure.
How about you, Adam?
Probably best modern driver I've probably seen is Brad Sweet. Like every year he's been like, and even seeing his form, what he's doing in the US even this year, he's just something else. He's like top driver. You know, you look locally in Australia, going back and thing like I said, Max Dumsney, Gary Rush, the Tatnells, they're all up there with some of the best drivers that are up there. So for me it's hard to just narrow it down to just one driver.
How about you, Adam? Daniel?
Well, obviously anytime the Dumsney or Maximus put on a show, he's obviously the standout for mine now, all the way back from 1992 to 2021. But also being able to watch Smoke race in the flesh after watching him in Indy cars during the late 90s and getting into watch racing, in your local city was pretty good, and obviously he had a good time while he's down here too. Got into a couple of fights, so he clearly he lived up to his brief, which was good. So that's kind of the local legend in Max, and then obviously the international flavour was good as well.
I think he wasn't having a good time. That's why he ended up having the fight.
Nah. That's when he's fighting. He's comfortable.
Well, that was why him and Donny Schatz have never come back since.
Yeah.
Which was a shame. Donny Schatz was awesome around Parramatta.
Yeah, he was. Well, I was gonna say it's a bold statement, but I was gonna say who's the best to ever race around there, and he'd have to be there or thereabouts.
Yeah. Well, he won so many of the 50,000 to win, which became the Darley Classics. He won so many of them in a row.
Yeah, it's that's you could see the class, like just visually, how much he stood out. So
if you want to see a good one, go to the Sydney Speedway YouTube page and look up the YouTube page. Look up the 2011 Darley and the highlights of it. And when Donny Schatz, he's leading, gets balked by a spinner with 2 laps to go, and Craig Delansky gets in front of him, and then Donny just gets straight on it. He runs up the back of Delansky, come around to start the last lap and gets the front wheels off the ground, but then he just hooks it up around the outside and gets the lead back on the last corner. And that was his last season, I think, running at Parramatta. That's a really cracking race to watch.
Who's your favourite, Luke?
Oh, have to be Steve Kinser.
I thought you were going to say Steve Bugatto.
I did enjoyed very much watching Steve Bugatto race the wingless, but I just loved the Americans coming over. And yeah, Steve Kinser He'd have to be the. It's pretty cool to, you can sit here and you can say I saw, Steve Kinzer, George Tatnall, Brooke Tatnall, Gary Rush, Max Dumsney, Semi Swindell, like all, Donny Schatz, all the way down like Brad Sweet and that. Can say
James
I'll
Thompson.
watch James Thompson. I can say I watched them all race at Parramatta. Yeah, I was a fan of Kinzer. Locally, we're a bit of as I said before, we were a bit of a Max Dumsney family as a kid, but I've always followed Brooke Tatnall.
We haven't mentioned as well, this been talking about sprint cars, which is fair enough. But I will say, equal to the sprint cars, my favourite cars to watch at Parramatta are the late models.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they always put on a really good event.
They're like the sports sedans of dirt racing, and I think they are super cool.
Yeah, they were great, and they always seem to get a good turn up of entries, and the sound. I love the sound of them.
Yeah.
And the attitude in the corners.
I just wanted to mention it in case anyone from that class listens to this podcast, that I really rate those cars, and I can't wait to watch them again at Eastern Creek.
Yeah. I was gonna say too, like the sound of those are incredible. The way they just lean on each other around the corners. That's never miss them when they roll out. Even
Speed cars,
speed cars, yeah.
But
Geez, they
even,
have some stacks too.
well, even you come down like production sedans, in there, like that's good close racing the whole way through. Like I really don't think there's, on most nights, there's a bad race at all. Like whether they're going as quick as the sprint cars or the late models, speed cars, all the way down to production sedans. Like it's just good close hard racing, no matter where you go.
And obviously the what are they called? The not super stadium super trucks. When they had their one off there too, which was sensational.
Yeah, we made a late call to go to that one, and that was great. They even ran him in the rain.
Yeah, they did too.
That's right. Yeah.
That was a really really good night. That's when they ran him around the. They didn't do the little infield section for one of the races. They just ran them around the speedway.
Well, I think because it got so bogged in there, they just ran them as so obviously they weren't jumping, but they didn't need to. It was almost better without it. So
one of my memories of that is after the event when we went in the pits, and they had them all parked up, all the stadium trucks on show, and you could tell Robbie Gordon was the owner of the category, because he was just, if anyone wanted a photo, you could get as close as you wanted. He was just sitting there. He'd answer any question. He just had a big smile on his face. He was just, he couldn't have been any better to anyone.
And he pulled some donuts as well. out on what's the street?
I don't think he did he?
No, that's slander.
I think that was in Darwin. But that was good. That brings up another topic, like it wasn't just your traditional speedway categories that ran there. They to try and get people to create a bit of particularly to attract the kids and that, they had things like stadium trucks, and they always had monster trucks every year. And
I think they did freestyle motocross shows every now and again in the centre, and
the monster trucks used to be good. They'd crush the cars, and they'd have little races and that in the middle. But the ones that took the cake, I think, was the Dunny Derby and the trailer races.
Because they always did them towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I think they picked and chose, probably depending on what was racing the next week and things like that. And
yeah, because that's definitely a sight. Imagine just going down the M4, you pan left, and there's 10 cars running around with porta dunnies on the back of trailers running around a speedway.
Yeah, there was one penciled in for the final season as well. It was a shame that one never happened.
The biggest shame of the entire history of Parramatta Speedway is when Luke didn't show up to an event because it was too hot.
Yep. Yeah. And I do still kick myself at that a bit. but it was
So
very
you
hot.
should-
That was the night Corey Eliason won that race. Yeah, that was the night it was still 45 degrees at about 9:30 p.m.
We had a great night, mate.
I know, and you've let me know. That was
the $4 beers would have gone down well that
Yeah,
night.
right. That was actually the best night of racing I've ever seen.
Because the track was so slick. Yeah.
That's unfortunate because I think that was sort of the first week of January 2020, wasn't it?
Yeah, I remember that weekend. That was scorching.
Yeah. So I went on the first of January, the New Year's night event, and then I was supposed to go that night with Brock, but yeah, I pulled the pin. It was pretty hot, and sort of the next event I was planning to go to was the what was going to be the inaugural USC Nationals, which had replaced the Scott Darley Classic. So but unfortunately that got rained out.
That's your karma.
That was my karma. And then sort of, just the way life works, I didn't manage to get to any other events after that. And then COVID claimed it. Yeah, so the last event I went to then was January 1, 2020. How about you?
This is why Luke can't go to Le Mans or anything. Because
it was shut down.
He'd shut it down like it's a COVID case.
No, Indianapolis has survived his curse. So
Well, it must have been under 25 degrees all day.
yeah.
You know what? Actually, I think that January 1 one, I think it was a cloudy night. You probably needed a jumper. What was the last one you went? Well, and then I was going to go to the USC Nationals, but it was rained out.
Yeah.
What was the last event you went to, Daniel and Adam?
I think it was
Oh.
Boxing Day, wasn't it? Boxing
Yeah.
Day 2019.
19.
Yeah, because we went Boxing Day because that's when I forget the driver's name, but he
Jackson
was
Delano.
hung it off the fence.
Yeah.
So that was Boxing Day, yeah, and then we went back a few nights later, yeah.
Sad thing is, we all left there not knowing it was our last time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Don't say stuff like that. That messes with my head. It's like I heard one. It's like one day you had a sleepover with your school friends, and it was the last sleepover you had, and you didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
Like, it's just super eerie. And then to put it in the context of the last Parramatta Speedway event you saw, like, it's just really eerie, I think. And I don't think we need that sort of negativity.
Yeah.
Not in this podcast.
Yeah.
We're not.
It's all positive thoughts.
All positive. We're celebrating here. Well,
Yeah.
I will say, I have to say, just about the best race I ever saw at Parramatta would be speaking of the Darley, was the 2014 Scott Darley Classic, the Trevor Green one. That was like an endurance race.
Mm.
The track got so dry that there was no dust coming up. They were pretty much getting smoke off the tyres. And there were so many yellow laps that they were worried they were going to run out of fuel. Everyone was popping tyres, and it was dominated by Tim Kading, and he led the majority of the race, but then he got a puncture. It was Steve Kins's last appearance in Australia, and he blew his tyre and turn 4. And yeah, Trevor Green was able to hold on to win, and that full race is available on the Sydney Speedway YouTube page as well, which is that's a good watch. The kicker to all that being that at the end of the race, they invited everyone onto the track to watch the presentation, and me and the friend we were with, we left our chairs up in the spectator area and went down anyway. We're walking back, and as we walk along, my friend goes, "They looked like our chairs that person was carrying." We get back up to our turn 2 seats, and our chairs are gone.
That's brutal.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me.
They wouldn't be Speedway fans. They're probably just some interlopers.
They were good chairs too. $5 from Bunnings or something.
Yeah, but $5 back then is probably like, $35 chair now.
Exactly.
Someone was hoarding. They weren't hoarding toilet paper back then. They were hoarding chairs.
7 years of inflation.
Yeah.
What sort of chairs are they? Have cup holders and all the jazz, or
It did. It had a cup holder, one of those mesh cup holders. So what the new Speedway, which from what I've read now is going to be called Eastern Creek Speedway. First of all, what do we think of the name?
I think it sums up the situation pretty good.
Yeah, it's accurate.
It is, but I only
you know where to go. Yeah.
Does what it says on the box.
I only asked that because it was originally Eastern Creek International Raceway, and it changed its name to Sydney Motorsport Park, and the dragway was Western Sydney International Dragway. Now it's become Sydney Dragway. Yet the Speedway, you'd think they might want to get their you think the promotion might have wanted to all be in sync, and they've gone and called it Eastern Creek Speedway.
Do you reckon the name might evolve though? I'm with you. I think give it, by the time it's opening, it might just be called Sydney Speedway.
Well, I think
Valvoline Speedway.
Well,
and
I
I'll
think
get some sponsorship or something for it.
I don't think they can use the Sydney Speedway name because I think that's probably still tied to Parramatta City Raceway, because I think that was their working name in the last few years, and perhaps it's still trademarked maybe with the Waldrons.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe in time they can get back. Yeah.
Yeah, but it had
it
the
makes sense.
It had the working title of Western Sydney International Speedway for a long time during sort of the initial build up to the formal announcement of who was going to run the track and everything. So, yeah, but it seems like they've adopted Eastern Creek Speedway. But on the Valvoline branding you mentioned, Brock, that could be the next question. Like, what should carry over from Parramatta City Raceway into the new track?
The bar.
I think there'll definitely be bars at this one.
Probably won't
the
be
bar.
$4 beers though.
Yeah, exactly. There needs to be Parramatta prices.
Well, that's a good point. But hang on, a Parramatta price is more expensive than Blacktown prices?
Well, probably, yeah.
Well, I guess going off track, 100%, like decent bars, and not just one bar, two bars, so it doesn't get overcrowded, so you're not waiting for your beers or your drink of choice too much. Probably on track, I reckon the track surface, it has to be. I know I mentioned it earlier for it, but they got the track surface to a point where they prepped it and it produced good racing lines, low and high. So hopefully they can transfer a good racing surface so it just doesn't become one lined from there. And hopefully it's got a bit of a lip, like if they can just transpose the surface area of the track where at both ends you got a bit of runoff, so the drivers they can push the limits a little, so if they go up to the cushion and it falls off, that they've got a bit of leeway on the top half there and they can keep going again rather than just hitting a wall.
I don't think there'll be any runoff. From what I read, that you can't design a track with runoff these days.
Yeah, right.
I think from what I've read, you have to have a wall. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, well, from all the renders, this track's got it's going to look like
Perth Motorplex.
Warrnambool. Yeah, it's just got a wall right around the outside, which is a bit of a shame. That's what made Parramatta a bit unique, because you could really round the corners off and everything, and if you're having a go.
Well, I guess the other thing is, the cushion on the top is potentially going to build up quicker, people going up higher with the dirt landing up on the wall and then sliding down, so you can get up there and run it a bit more. But yeah, I guess just somewhere it produces good two lanes of racing surface to give options instead of just follow the leader and hope they make a mistake.
Yeah. We mentioned it a bit earlier, but presumably some form of clay per view will have to get carried over. Presumably not clay per view itself, but some form of streaming will have to be part of it.
Well, and you might have mentioned this, who's promoting it? Like, who's running?
The Kellys.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So they run Archerfield.
Yeah.
And long time Speedway involvement. Peter Kelly used to drive, and
yeah. So no, yeah. So yeah, that'd have to be a one, which seems pretty standard package for all Speedway in the country these days. So.
And I wonder I would assume the USC branding won't carry across.
You wouldn't think so, since that was tied up with
Made to Go, the Waldrons.
Yeah. So, and with them still operating the two other tracks, I don't know. I don't see them wanting to let go of that.
Yeah, or I suppose considering the Kellys run a competing track in Queensland,
True.
they but watching another Sprint Car Hub podcast, it was mentioned the why the USC tag came about, and it was sort of to create an event for people to go to, rather than someone saying I'm going to Parramatta to watch the sprint cars. It was like, I'm going to see the USC, the Ultimate Sprint Car Championship at Parramatta.
Yeah, like a marquee.
Yes. So I think I didn't necessarily like the USC term, but the idea behind it, I think, was a good idea. So I think, rather than just like for in sort of the 90s, it was sort of the track championship was called the Peter Jackson Sydney Sprint Car Premiership.
Yeah.
And I think years later it was, I think it was the Goodyear Sydney Sprint Car Premiership. Yeah, a name like that I thought's really good, rather than just saying it's the Parramatta Track Championship or the Eastern Creek Track Championship. Giving it a name to promote, I think would be a good idea. And the most important thing they need to carry across from Eastern Creek, or to Eastern Creek from Parramatta, the VW Beetle track packing car.
That should be easy. Just drive it up the M4 and drop it in.
That has to go to Eastern Creek.
Well, hopefully it's going to be a new venue with the lease and everything like that. Hopefully it's still reasonably priced to get in, and so you can get those families coming in, watching the Speedway, everything like that, and like all the vendors for like food and everything isn't just overpriced like what you go to some football grounds where it costs you well over $100 just to get in the gate for a family, and then you go in there and burger, chips, and a drink's almost $15-20. Like that's going to be a hard sell to get people to go there when you're spending upwards of nearly $200 for a family to go out for a night.
Well, but I think we'll see what the promoter does. But when you compare what you pay in Sydney Motorsport Park, Eastern Creek, do you know what I mean? Like you just get your standard event prices, whereas that was the nice, I guess you'd say, novelty of Parramatta Speedway. So I wouldn't be surprised if that gets lost, but I guess we'll give the promoters every chance.
So just some final stats when it comes to Parramatta City Raceway. The last Parramatta Sprint Car track champion, USC New South Wales, as it was called, was Marcus Dumsney. He won the curtailed 2019-2020 season. So good to see the Dumsney name, the last one on the list there.
It's fitting. That's what I would say.
And as going along with that, the last Sprint Car A-Main winner was Matt Dumsney.
It's a very good theme here.
Yeah, he won the King of the Clay event on February 29, 2020. The last race night ended up being March 7, 2020, which was a non-sprint car night, but it featured the Legend Cars Australian Championship, also featured speed cars, V8 dirt mods, and wingless sprints. I couldn't work out from the reports I read what the final race was, so I can't tell you who the last winner of a race at Parramatta Speedway was. I can take a rough guess. Perhaps it was the Legends race because it was the Legend cars, because it was the Australian Championship. And that was won by Robert Rawlings. The speed car event was won by Nathan Smee. The V8 dirt mods were won by Scott Cannon. And the wingless sprints were won by Marshall Blyton. There was an event planned for March 14, Saturday, March 14, which was called Sprint Fest, which was to feature sprint cars, wingless sprints, lightning sprints, and the AMCAs. But on the 13th of March, on the same day the Australian Grand Prix was called off, Valvoline Raceway cancelled the March 14 event. And sadly, that was it. There was, nothing happened for the next couple of months, motorsport at all. And as we know, that was that.
Do you know what the lap record was?
I believe it's Sam Walsh.
Yeah, I'm just looking it up here. Yeah, Sam Walsh is correct. Any guess on the time?
Is it
11.5? Go
11.5?
first. Daniel?
11.2.
I'm going to go an 11.3.
And do you know what the correct answer is?
Yep.
11.5 by Sammy Walsh, April 2017.
Well, there you go.
Smack
I obviously
on the
did
money.
do my research, didn't I?
So that's pretty quick because, like, you look at some of the others. So, speed cars, it's a 14.3. Late models are a 14.5. Leader sprints, 14.5. Super sedans are at 15.7. Dirt modifieds, 15.9. Wingless sprints, 16.8. And AMCA's 18.1 seconds for the list I've got here. So just looking at sprint cars, how much quicker with the downforce that they've got are nearly 3 seconds quicker than a speed car, and the speed cars are moving when they're running around there. It's just amazing.
In terms of sort of the local drivers, I was a bit of a, Sam Walsh had sort of become my sort of favourite of sort of the local drivers. Week in, week out at Parramatta. So I'm pretty glad to see he's the one who'll hold for eternity the lap record. Any sort of final thoughts on the track before we head off?
Oh, I think, it for the 43 years that I was there, it produced some great nights of racing, put some, paved the way for some Australian stars to go out, New South Wales Australian stars to go overseas, especially to America, to go race over there. But, it was just a great venue that provided good racing, and hopefully with the new venue coming, it continues on the trend of, great speedway racing in Western Sydney for me.
Yeah, sad, but awesome. And yeah, it is what it is. Looking forward to the next chapter and lots of happy memories.
Daniel?
Yeah. Well, I think just being thankful that the story continues. Do you know what I mean? It'll be a new venue, but it'll be the same cars, the same categories. Just another chapter. So no, it's I think it's not maybe not the ideal outcome, but it's still a pretty good option for all of us.
We still got to all enjoy it while it was there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess the great thing of Facebook and YouTube, that a lot of the races that either on Sydney Speedway's YouTube channel or other ones that people have put up, or Clay Per View and stuff, that the footage of great racing around there is still going to be around for years to come to go back and watch.
I'm just dirty. I never won a 50-50.
Yeah.
Did anyone win a 50-50? That's probably the...
No one I know won it, but
yeah.
But always put an entry in.
Well, will that get transferred across to the new Speedway?
I think so. I think it's
tradition.
Well, I think it was was it the track that did it or the club?
I thought it was the track. Put it on.
Yeah, I should have paid more attention to that when it was. The main problem I've got now is that I'm going to have to move house, because I don't know if I'll be able to bear looking out my window every day watching it slowly get bulldozed.
Well, are you a train enthusiast?
Look, I don't mind my trains, but I think this overrides it.
I mean, I'm a bit of a train enthusiast. I mean, it's still pretty cool.
Yeah. But I don't know, I prefer my older trains, not my newer trains.
Yeah, like the big steam trains. Don't they come through occasionally?
Not on the metro line.
It's all right. You can always look at the Tangaras and stuff.
They are old now. So that'll about wrap things up. Thank you to Adam, Daniel and Brock for joining me on reminiscing about the history of Parramatta City Raceway. Don't forget to visit Breakthrough Health and Wellness on Facebook, Instagram, and also check out mybreakthrough.com.au. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next podcast again soon.